Look at the person next to you and say, it's going to be ridiculous. Anyone ready to be absurd? Get a little preposterous, a little ludicrous, a little outrageous. Face some things that people say, it's impossible. And then after God does it, they're like, oh, I guess it was possible. You ever see things, people are like, that's unbelievable, and then they saw it like, I guess it is believable. And we're stepping here into John chapter 11 here in a moment, and this is the seventh sign. This is the miracle that puts everything into motion, that speeds things up, that leads to the crucifixion. You're like, oh no, why the crucifixion? It's where Jesus paid for our sins, that he died on the cross so that we can receive forgiveness, and the crucifixion leads to the resurrection. And it's at this moment here in John chapter 11 that Mary and Martha send word to Jesus. They're like, man, our baby brother Lazarus is sick. Now, we need to understand that this is no just ordinary, like, family right here. Jesus was close with this family. Jesus loved this family. Do you have people that you're close to? People that you love? Like people that you care deeply about. Jesus cared deeply about them. Martha is the oldest. Mary's in the middle, and Lazarus is the baby. And they're taking care of their baby brother. Do we have any older siblings, and maybe like you helped raise your younger? Like, so they're helping take care, and they send word, and they're like, Jesus, our brother is sick. And Jesus says, this sickness will not end in death. You need to get that. He says it's not going to end in death. No, it's for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. I want to remind us that Jesus will speak to the problem, not about the problem. And I think so many of us have become experts in talking about the problem, talking about how bad the problem is, talking about how much of a struggle it's been going through this season with COVID, talking about how many issues our nation is facing right now, talking about how many struggles are going out right now in our state, talking about how things when the homeless population are in such a bad place, and how so much is needing to be done. We love to talk about our problems, and we love to talk about other people's problems, but Jesus gives a promise. I want you to know that if you have a problem, Jesus has a promise. It says in Proverbs 30, in case you don't believe me, Proverbs 30, it says someone say every promise of God proves true. He protects everyone who runs to him for help. So if you haven't been protected, maybe you haven't been running to Jesus. Maybe you've now been running to the bars as they're starting to open. Maybe you've been running back to that old toxic relationship. Maybe you've been running to the computer late at night and looking at some things you should not be looking at that are not healthy for your marriage. Maybe you've been running to, we need to run to Jesus. If you keep running to Jesus, if you keep running to Jesus, you won't run out. Anyone ready for ridiculous belief? Now Jesus, he speaks. It's not going to end in death. He speaks, but then he stays. Why wait? He said it's not going to end in death. So it's like, well, Jesus, go. It doesn't make sense to us. Why wait? Why delay? Does anyone love to wait? You're just excited to go to the store, and it's a long line, and you're 6 feet apart, and you're trying to figure out how long this is. Does anyone love to wait? I don't like waiting. We were at Miami International Airport last night, and our flight was delayed, and I don't like waiting, and I'm getting frustrated, and the kids are hungry, and airport food is expensive, and it's overpriced. Anyone know, y'all know that, delays can be frustrating? This wasn't even quite a 2-hour delay last night, but this is two days. But there's a difference between delays that are frustrating and delays that are devastating. It was frustrating having the flight delayed, but it's devastating waiting to see if insurance is going to cover that medical procedure. Can anyone, it's frustrating with your flight being delayed, but it's devastating waiting on that doctor's report to find out if the cancer is back. Anyone get like there's a difference between delays that are frustrating and devastating, and we can begin to think like, Jesus, if you loved me, if you really loved me, you'd come now. Jesus, if you really loved me, you'd answer my prayer right now. Can we just acknowledge that Jesus' behavior right here seems to contradict his love for this family? Am I the only one looking at this? Am I the only one who has moments where you're like, God, if you really loved me, you would have done this by now. God, if you really, really loved me, you would have restored this relationship by now. God, if you really, really loved me, you would have healed this family member. Am I the only one who does like everyone else is like, no, I trust God's sovereignty. No, like, well, God, like, it's just like, God, if you really loved me, but here's what I've discovered, that God's love is not pampering, it's preparing. Anyone go through the season? God, I'm really just not enjoying this time right now, God. God, if you would really just do this in our nation, and if you would really just do this, God, I'm not enjoying this. I'm constantly being triggered. God, I'm constantly having this. God, and like God's love is not to pamper you, it's to prepare you. It may not feel like it. It may not look like it, but God's love is pure. Because there's a difference between how God is going to do it and how we want him to do it. Come now! Do it now! And when? We want it done according to our desires. But God is doing it according to your destiny. You see, he's working on his disciples. He's working on the people. It's like, okay, come on. It's time to have a ridiculous belief and realize God's delays are not God's denials. So after 2 days, in 2 days, you're like, 2 days is nothing. I got to guarantee when your brother is sick and he's dying, it had to seem forever. And after 2 days, Jesus finally tells his disciples, okay, let's go. It's time to go. And they're like, have you lost your mind? It's going to be dangerous. It's not safe. Do you remember last time we were in that area? They tried to stone you. In our culture today with legalized marijuana and all that, I have to explain. You're not talking about getting stoned like some of y'all got stoned too much through the pandemic, right? Like he's talking about like physical stones being thrown. Like they're saying like we can't, like we shouldn't go. Isn't it amazing that after all these years following Jesus, they're taking direction from their circumstances? Isn't it amazing, after all the years I've still been following Jesus, that I still take direction from my circumstances? And I try to tell Jesus, no, it's not safe. Isn't it amazing? Like we shouldn't go. Has anyone ever done this with Jesus? Like if I was one of the disciples, maybe I would have said, like, you go. I'm good. I'll wait here. Like I'm good. Like following you's been exhausting, Jesus. You don't even give us a day off. Like this is way more than 40 hours a week. Like the benefits, like we don't even get health coverage. Like I just need a day off. And yet I've discovered that many believers didn't just take a day off during COVID. They disappeared for 14 months. Like following Jesus, and then it's like, okay, well now because of the pandemic, now because of COVID, now because of all the tension in our nation, I'm just going to take a season off, because there's a difference between God's way and our way. If I was one of the disciples, it would have been like, Jesus, what if you just sent your word? Do you remember John's sign number 2, where the centurion showed up? Jesus didn't even go. He just sent his word. The disciples come in. Jesus, just send your word. It's not safe, so just send your word. Or do you remember sign number 6, where there was the man who was born blind and Jesus made mud? Like, Jesus, can't we pack up some miracle mud? We'll put it, we'll hand it, we'll send it, put some mud all over Lazarus. Let's do it a different way. Here's what I've discovered. Caring is daring. Like, do you ever see parents take action on protecting their kids from something that is actually putting themselves in harm's way because they care. You see how much someone cares about you when you actually see what they're willing to risk. So Jesus tells his disciples, hey, Lazarus has fallen asleep. I need to go and wake him up. And his disciples are like, if he's sleeping, it's good. Like he'll sleep. Like anyone know, like when you're sick, you need to sleep. Sometimes the fever will break in the middle of the night. He needs to rest. If he's sleeping, let's not go wake him up. He will get better. They don't get what Jesus is saying, much like many of us don't really get what Jesus is saying. Can you see the patience Jesus has with them? Anyone grateful for the patience Jesus has with us? That oftentimes we don't get what he's saying. I mean, come on, you look at these guys. Like Peter at moments was unstable. You get Thomas is asking questions. Judas is stealing. I think everyone has a Judas. Our church was recently broken into. We had cameras. It was an inside job. Jesus had Judas, and so someone else here, like, just happened this last week, but that's okay. We won't slow down. We'll keep ministering to people. Like, yeah. God's their judge, right? It's like, wait, hold on. Jesus is dealing with all this. What is Jesus doing? Jesus is preparing them for what he has prepared for them. To build his church. What's Jesus doing right now? You see, if their faith is weak, their work cannot be strong. Maybe this is more than just Lazarus. Maybe this is Jesus being patient with us, getting it wrong on our way to getting it right, to developing a ridiculous belief. And so Jesus finally puts it plain and simple. He says, Lazarus is dead. And then he says something crazy. He says, and I'm glad. Like this is the Bible, people. Yeah, he's dead and I'm glad. Can you imagine if the doctor came out? Yeah, I'm sorry, your family member didn't make it and I'm glad. Yeah. It's cancer and I'm glad. Wait, hold on, why? For your sake, so you may believe. Okay, but hold on. This is crazy. So that they may believe. Didn't they already believe? What's he talking about? They've been following Jesus for some time. They saw him take water and turn it into wine. They saw him heal people. They saw him take 5 loaves and 2 fish and feed thousands and thousands of people. They saw him walk on water. Didn't they believe already? Jesus could have gone and healed Lazarus, but they'd already seen that. Jesus could do what you've been asking him to do, but maybe you've already seen it. What he's going to do here is like what he's going to do in someone's life today. He's going to do something that is going to take your faith to a whole nother level, because we tend to believe only for what we've already seen. We tend to believe for what we've already heard, but God wants to do something greater. And I love Thomas, because Thomas gets a bad rap. But Thomas is like, let's go and die. This is not a statement of great faith. I love it. He's doubting, but at least he's devoted. He's loyal and he's courageous. And I can just tell you that Lindsay and I are grateful for people who've stayed loyal and courageous. Like, I don't know if we're going to make through this, but we got your back. I don't know what's happening. I don't know, but like, anyone just grateful for those in your life who are loyal and courageous? And Thomas doesn't believe that they're going to make, like, let's go and die. But here's the thing, both faith and fear are driven by what you think will happen. If you're afraid, you think something negative is going to happen. If you have faith, you believe something good is going to happen. And what if you keep following Jesus, like the disciples, and watch your fear transformed into faith? A ridiculous belief. So they get there. I'm not even to the scripture yet. You all okay here? This has now been 4 days. Jesus gets there. It's important to understand 4 days, because in our culture, we don't really understand this, because according to Jewish tradition, a person's spirit would linger around the body for 3 days. So if Jesus had shown up after he died in the first 3 days, it would have been a miracle if he raised him from the dead. But people would have said, oh, his spirit was still lingering. But now on the 4th day, it's impossible. It's unbelievable. By this point, according to some things I read on checked with a few people who understand medicine, the body would have already started to decay. Do you have anything in your life that's not just dead, but it's already decomposing? And I love it because here comes Jesus. Here comes Jesus. You need to know right now, here comes Jesus into your life. Here comes Jesus into your hurt. Here comes Jesus into your pain. And Martha runs to Jesus. Imagine Martha running to Jesus, falls at his feet. If you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Anyone have this conversation with Jesus? If you'd been there, they wouldn't have walked out on me. If you had been there, my family would not have been evicted. If you had been there, anyone ever done that with Jesus? Jesus, if you had been here, it wouldn't have already, it would like she knew he could heal, but her brother's dead. I have a question. Are you led by your senses or by the Spirit? Are you led by your feelings or by faith? Are you led by what you see or by what God said? There's nothing wrong with having feelings, but it's dangerous when your feelings finally have you. You don't always have control, but you always have a choice. What if you make a decision? You make a choice for your faith to go to a ridiculous level. Okay, wait, but here's what she says. But I know that even now, someone say even now. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. We need even now faith. Even now. But I know even now. And so Jesus is like, yeah, your brother's going to rise again. And she thinks he's talking about the second coming and all this. And she's like, no, I know he will rise. And Jesus makes a ridiculous revelation. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. And so Martha here, who's known for being distracted. Do you remember when Jesus was there and Mary was at his feet? And Martha's like, oh, Jesus, I'm in the kitchen. I'm cooking, I'm grilling steaks, and I got some whatever you like to make. And Mary's just here, just at your feet. She was the one known for being distracted. But here she's the one running to Jesus. You see, someone during this season, life has distracted you. But you can quickly go from being distracted to being devoted. Because before she was distracted, but now she's devoted. And she goes and she gets married. And now we pick up in John chapter 11. Y'all okay? Verse 32. And so she goes and gets married. And when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit, and he was troubled. Do you notice that she said the same thing her sister said? If you'd been here. It's like they might have been together before Jesus got there, saying if Jesus had been there, talking all about how Jesus had let them down. If he'd been here, if he had just showed up all those times. I poured perfume on his feet, put my hair all over his toes. And remember all the meals that you made, and we opened our house. And after all the times we showed up and we served at church, and we even helped in the kids ministry. And there are some parents who haven't done a very good job, so their kids are completely out of control. All the times I served in the parking lot, and I would help park cars and trying to not get hit, all the times that I put off buying something to financially, after all we've done, if you'd been here. If you'd been here. But we see that these sisters in their suffering, they run to Jesus. They haven't stopped running to Jesus. Don't stop running to Jesus. Don't keep running to that addiction. Don't keep running to that unhealthy behavior. Don't keep running to those toxic places. And I love this because she falls at his feet and she's honest and she doesn't even say much. She probably doesn't say much because she's overcome by grief. Can anyone relate? You get in a moment even here in church and I don't even got words if you've been here. She's crying. You ever been those moments where you you would try to talk, but you can't, like, or you're with a friend and they're crying and talking, trying to talk, but you don't really, like, you're ever at a moment where, like all I have is tears. I don't have words. I'm not talking about that cute cry. You know, some women, like, they have that fake cute cry, like, that they take selfies with. Like, it's like, you know, a tear, you know, it's just like, you know, it's like, I'm talking about the one where you got, like, snot coming out of your nose. I'm talking about the one where you got, like, mascara, like, all over your face, and it's just like the ugly cry. Anyone know, like, you get a moment, like, this is not a cute cry. This is like, I have lost it. This is an ugly cry. But if you are overcome by trouble, learn from Mary and Martha, get at the feet of the one who always overcomes. And Jesus says, where have you laid him? Come and see, Lord, they replied. Verse 35, the shortest verse in the English Bible, Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him? See. But some of them said, there's always some who say, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Like, you know, like, yo, like, Jesus, couldn't he have healed him? Like, Jesus, would it really have been too hard for you to show up and save that relationship? Jesus, would it really have been too hard for you to show up and keeping my kid from overdosing again? Jesus, couldn't it, like, so we're thinking we're pointing out missed opportunities. Like, Jesus, you really missed it here. You could have, but, and Jesus is crying. Imagine looking there like, it's really bad if Jesus is crying. Can anyone relate? Like, oh no, this is worse than I thought now. Now Jesus is crying. Anyone read this and you're like, oh, it was bad when Mary and Martha and everyone was crying, but now Jesus is crying? Is it? Is it bad? The Greek word here describing Jesus crying is used nowhere else in the New Testament. When I read about it, they would say it most likely speaks to not a loud weeping like Mary and Martha, but like a silent weeping. You read this, you're like, why is Jesus weeping? You're going to discover in a few moments, it's not because, like, of what's happened, because he knows what's going to happen. He's not weeping because of what? He's weeping because of who's hurting. I wonder if Jesus would be looking at our lives, looking at our stuff today, weeping, not as we're weeping, but I'm grateful that we have a Savior who's not only full of authority, but he's full of empathy. And verse 38 says, Jesus, once more, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha. Now Martha had a big butt, like many of us do today. But Lord, by this time, if you got here when you were supposed to get here, by this time, there is a bad odor. Like, y'all think your junior high boys' room stinks? Like, this is going to be, there's a bad odor for he's been in there 4 days. Jesus is like, take away the stone. And imagine Martha and everyone standing there like, wait, why are we were the ones who were with our brother when we were waiting on you. We were the ones trying to keep his fever down. We were the ones patting him with water. We were the ones watching our brother slowly die while we kept waiting on. Can anyone see Jesus coming in the distance? Can anyone know? Like, wait, you're telling me, but because I've lived this thing, and we had days where we were waiting for you to show up because we knew that you could heal, and we watched him take his last breath, and we watched life leave. We watched life leave his eyes, and we were the ones who helped wrap his body, and we were the ones who put him, and he's now been in there for 4 days. People look at you and you're like, why is that your expectation? Because this has been my experience. So when Jesus says believe, you're like, I got a big butt. Because I've lived this thing, Jesus. And it's easier to reduce our faith to the reality of our problems than to elevate our faith to the reality of God's promise. You don't need a description of your circumstance. You need an interpretation of your circumstance. I remember speaking in India a long time ago to tens of thousands of people, and I had 2 interpreters because whatever I said, they couldn't understand. It had to be interpreted into 2 different dialects. When I talk with people who speak a different language, I need an interpreter because I could be saying one thing, they could be saying something else, but the only way we're going to communicate is through an interpreter. The only way you're going to understand what God is doing is not by explaining to him, giving him a description of everything that has happened in your life. He knows everything that has happened in your life. You need an interpretation. What if you make up in your mind you're going to interpret circumstances through God's promise, not through your problems? Jesus says in verse 40, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Jesus looked up. Someone, you need to look up. You can't go up in life if you keep looking down and keep speaking down. He looked up. Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. Believe. He's talking about really believing. Do you really believe? Like, I'm talking about, like, do you remember when you first got saved? And, like, someone would be like, man, you know, it's like, yeah, my mom has cancer. Let's pray right now. I believe that they're going to get healed. And you actually prayed and believed that Jesus would. Do you remember when you first got saved and you really believed that Jesus was who he really is and can do what only Jesus? Like, do you remember, like, when you actually really... But have facts been destroying your faith? Have we gone through this last season where all the facts have been destroying our faith when the facts weren't there to destroy our faith? They were there actually to develop our faith. That realizing even in the midst of all these things going on, we're like, but I see. But I see this. But Jesus said this. How come I say get rid of your big butt? And get some big belief. Stop looking down. Look up. Jesus prays boldly. Start praying boldly rather than, well, God, if you're really out there, if you really exist. I mean, I'm talking to Christians who now believe more like there's aliens than God. Like, it's just like, what is like ridiculous belief embraces God's promise and it releases God's power. And Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Anyone into The Walking Dead or you watch this? This is like, here comes Lazarus. This wasn't Jesus calling him from sickness to health. There's a much greater gap there. He's calling him from death to life. Be like, oh, we saw him turn water into wine. Do you remember we saw him walk on water? Or like, oh, do you remember when there was the one who was born blind and we saw, but we've never seen this before. What if you're about to enter into a time where you're going to see something you've never seen before? Oh, I've never even heard of God doing that before. Anyone remember those old infomercials? But wait, there's more. If you call in the next, I'm not trying to say infomercial. I'm just saying maybe there's more. Where they wanted the teacher to show up and heal. Where the Savior shows up and resurrects. This is a major sign here, right? This is like, anyone ready for like, you're ready to just have ridiculous, like, I'm gonna ridiculous, this is a massive sign. Anyone ready for this is like a sign that you can't miss. This is one of those things where you're like, wait, hold on. Jesus does so much more. I knew he could do that, but I didn't know Jesus is gonna do so much more in your life. But not only does Jesus do so much more, but he is so much more. Oh, but here's the thing though. Jesus said to them, now I've done my part, now it's your part. You take off his grave clothes and let him go. It's all Jesus, then it's all them. It's all Jesus, then it's all us as a church. Do you notice John's first sign contrasted with his seventh? His first sign that he writes about happens at a wedding. The seventh is like at a funeral. People came to mourn the death of Lazarus, but now they're having to deal with the mess of his life. And I think sometimes as church people, we can be like, you deal with your own grave clothes. You deal with your own addiction. You deal with your own struggle, but we need people. That's what ministry is. It's dealing with people's mess. People tell me, do you know? Well, I saw someone at your church, someone did it. I'm like, yeah, we're some really messed up people. We're still growing, we're still developing, we're still we've all still got grave clothes. Oh, I don't have grave clothes. Yeah, let's go talk with some people who knew you a few decades ago. They'll talk about, they'll remind you of all your, and yet some of us today, so you see, some of us are staring at the tomb of a dead thing. Others have come out, but you're still bound. And maybe you're too embarrassed to say, I know it's stinky, I know it's smelly, I know it's kind of gross, but I can't do this on my own. That we need each other. Because Jesus doesn't just give us a better life, he gives us new life. Jesus doesn't make bad people good. He makes dead people come alive. And I just want to remind us that as a church, we're not here to remind people of their past, but to remove barriers to their future. We love to quote Jeremiah 29:11. Come on, that's something worth clapping about, whether you're in the room, whether in your own room. We love to quote Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans God has for me, plans to prosper me and not to harm me, plans to give me hope and a future. It's like plans. So we loved, that's one of those Bible verses that you go to, right? I love it. It's a plan. It's a plan. But there's a difference between God's plan and our plan. Yes. I don't think this story was Mary or Martha's plan. So so many people are like, man, I'm making plans. I probably want to go on vacation, or I'm making plans for my career, or I'm making plans. But so many people right now are looking at life and being like, this wasn't my plan. Can anyone relate? You're looking and you're like, things have not gone according to plan. I had a great plan, but now I got a great problem. And they saw an opportunity for Jesus to do something realistic in their world and to heal. But Jesus saw a ridiculous opportunity. They believed he could heal, but not raise the dead. But today, for them, the unbelievable became believable. And I believe in someone's life, the unbelievable was becoming believable. I want to ask you, will you believe God even when the opposite has happened? Will you trust God's promise and not your problem? But I see this, but I see that. But what has God said? And I think that there's someone who, just like Mary and Martha, didn't really have much to say, but they ran to the feet of Jesus. Is that there's someone who just needs to fall at the feet of Jesus today. I say, I don't even have the words. If you've been here, but But maybe if you fall at his feet, even with tears running down your face, you could say, but even now, but even now, but even now, but even now, even though I feel like I'm falling apart, I'm going to fall at the feet of Jesus.